think to myself that preaching from the narrative lectionary is a lot like going on a blind date every week. You never know who's waiting for you. If I were a charismatic or Pentecostal minister, or even a Roman Catholic priest, this week's lesson about exorcism would probably be a really good match. But being a United Church of Christ minister, preaching to a room full of Congregationalists, well, this could be a bad blind date for all of us. Because we don't do exorcisms in the UCC. I checked the book of worship just to be sure, and there's not one single rite for exorcism. There are no seminary classes or continuing education courses, nothing. Which means that if an exorcism comes up for a UCC minister, we're pretty much on our own. So I just wanted to be upfront with you all about that. I have no exorcism experience. And now that we have that out of the way, let's get down to demons and how Jesus dealt with them. Our scene opens with Jesus and his disciples stepping out of their boat after a harrowing journey to the other side of the sea. If you were here last week, you may recall that we were back in Galilee where Jesus was preaching to the crowd on the beach and speaking in parables. Afterwards, as the disciples are packing everything up and getting ready to go home, Jesus announces that they will be taking a little trip immediately to the other side of the sea. They get caught up in a raging storm, which Jesus rebukes, and now as the night is giving way to day, they arrive on the other side of the lake in Gentile country. Now, I know what I'd be thinking as the boat hit the land. Coffee, for heaven's sakes, and some delicately fried fish. And I'd be thanking my lucky stars that I was still alive and that the dawn had risen in its pink, golden stillness. And boy, I just want to sit down and catch my breath. But no, no sooner than the boat slides up on the beach, and here comes a man just bursting with all sorts of unclean spirits. And not only that, he's naked, and he reeks with the stench of death. I mean, can you even imagine? Here you are doing your best to follow Jesus. You've just nearly died, and as you step finally onto the same dry ground, here comes this naked lunatic racing down from the tombs. Naked, crazy, and living in a cemetery. And I'm not talking like the quiet, peaceful cemeteries where we go and walk around and visit our loved ones. No, this is a cemetery of open tombs, hewn out of the side of the hill. Tombs that you could walk into where the bodies were laid out to decompose. And then all of the bits would be gathered up and put into a bone box. He lives there. I can just imagine the community telling its local visitors, "Oh, that guy, don't worry about him. That's just Bob. He's crazy, but he doesn't mean any harm. He just stays in the graveyard naked with his demons." But you see, this guy's not just merely crazy. He has what Mark calls an unclean spirit. In fact, Mark goes to a lot of trouble to make this distinction by naming not just one unclean spirit, but a whole legion of them. When Jesus asks the guy, "What is your name?" the man doesn't answer. The unclean spirit inside him answers. And he answers that his name is Legion, for we are many. We don't really know what to do with demon language, do we? Sure, it's in the Bible and everything, but that's because they didn't have all of our science and understandings. They didn't know any better. We tell ourselves. And it's certainly true enough that a lot of what we used to chalk up to demon possession can now be understood as mental illness. But that doesn't mean that we don't have our demons. Maybe they're not the bad spirit variety with horns and tails that we usually picture, but there is evil in this world. And there are plenty of external influences that cause us to do crazy things. In Mark's gospel, there are 13 healing miracles, 4 of which have Jesus casting out some sort of a demon or unclean spirit. So it's not just a blip on the radar. Mark is making a point, several points in fact, and maybe even a universal statement or two. And I think that we need to take note, because seriously, who can look at this world and not see evil? When governmental policy and war and indifference mean that some children starve while others have more than enough, in Sudan or Haiti or Romania, or even in our own country, is that merely unfortunate, or is it evil? When a child is abused, is that the result of bad choices, or a bad conscience, or bad upbringing, or is it evil? When a class of human beings is singled out for discrimination and abuse because of race, because of religion, because of gender, because of sexual preference, because of economic status, is that merely a social problem, or is it evil? When wars, just or unjust, fought for whatever reason, good or otherwise, claim tens and hundreds and thousands of innocent lives and wreak havoc on economies and environments and social institutions, is that merely the price to be paid for survival and security and freedom? Or is it in some way the fallout of the pervasive evil among us and even in us? Let's face it, we have plenty of our own unclean spirits to deal with, or legions of demons, or whatever. Part of the problem, I think, is that most of our knowledge about demons and possession comes from movies and books. But spooky and terrifying things that go bump in the night are not really what this gospel writer had in mind. The story of the demonically possessed man demonstrates Jesus confronting what the book of Ephesians and Colossians call the powers at work. Powers are systems and patterns of relating that take on a life of their own. They take on steam in our lives in ways that can be hard to change. They seem to have a mind of their own. And when broken, they become oppressive and destructive, shattering lives and communities. Powers like racism and white supremacy that send messages in our culture on every level about what it means to be a person of color, to be an immigrant, to have a different accent or inflection. They leave the message that if this is you, you are somehow less American, not as smart, not as hardworking, or not as deserving of as much as white folk. Powers that bombard us with unhealthy, toxic messages about our gender, our bodies, and about class, inflicting our attitudes about ourselves and everyone that we encounter. Evil is real, but it comes at us in many ways and it takes many forms. Pride, envy, greed, prejudice, bitterness, jealousy, corruption, oppression, abuse, apathy, self-indulgence, and vengeance. Divisive and oppressive evil that pervades our human spirits and our human institutions, and if that's not a legion of demons, then I don't know what is. So Jesus meets the demonic, a man possessed by the powers at work. He's out of his mind doing violence to himself and others, representing all those who are occupied by the powers of war, militarism, and empire. And Jesus just expels those demons right out of him. Dispatch us into the swine, Legion says to Jesus. So Jesus does, and the swine run down the hill and they're drowned. And okay, that part was a little weird. But what's even weirder is what happens next. The townspeople all show up, and instead of being grateful that the guy has just been restored to himself, they want Jesus to clear out. whatnot. We don't want you. We want our pigs. We want our life the way we know it. We were perfectly happy putting up with crazy mad people running around naked. We can deal with that, and we don't want you coming here and messing things up. And that's pretty much how it goes in this fallen world. We prefer our crazy people and our madness and our pigs because we want our life to be the way that we know it. I'm reminded of Plato's allegory of the cave, where from birth people are chained in a cave and the only reality they know is within that cave. There's a fire behind them that projects shadows on the wall, and the voice they hear from outside of the cave are all of the voices that they hear from outside of the cave, they assume come from the shadowy figures. One day, one of the prisoners is freed, and he meanders around the cave to find the fire that causes the shadows. He's so overwhelmed by the brightness of that fire that it temporarily blinds him. And Plato says, suppose someone tells this man that the fire is actually real and that the shadows are not. But for the man, the blinding light of the fire doesn't feel like reality. It has skewed everything he knows. So he returns back to his chains and the shadows on the wall. What if you were confronted with the reality that there is some sort of a belief that you have, or a way of doing things, or a reality that you've lived into that was not completely true, or for that matter, not true at all? Can you imagine being that man possessed with the Spirit and coming face to face with Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life? Every one of us, at some point in our lives, have harbored demons. Anger, resentment, lies, addiction, and they can be our reality. We can walk with them, and we can get comfortable with how we function with them. Then, when the truth comes to stare those things in the eye, it can feel quite unsettling. And this is this Jesus story. That we are invited to come face to face with the truth and the light and allow that to envelop us and to exorcise our demons. And yeah, it's going to hurt and it's going to be uncomfortable, but following the truth does indeed set you free. We are all of us walking this healing journey. Some of us have it figured out better than others. Some of us are taking a deep look into our reality and seeing what differences we can make in our lives and in the world. Some of us aren't quite there yet, but have the inkling that there is something beyond the mundane of our lives. And some of us have fallen down on our faces this morning, back into old habits. But I tell you this, when you allow the light and the truth to transform you, you are more open and available to be a better you for those around you, your loved ones, and your community, and yourself. And you're more in touch with the pulse of God in this world. When you let your walls come down and allow that light to flood in, that brief moment of extreme vulnerability is the place, the exact place, where transformation and exorcism begins. Thanks be to God, and may it be with you all according to God's word. Amen.